let's talk about how we can actually break the monotony. The first way is to ask questions in class. Of course, as a mass lecture over here, and this is the very, very first time that I know all of you and I've met all of you, it's probably not very nice of me to suddenly ask you a question. Yeah. But if you were in a classroom of 20 to 30 students, definitely online ask questions to random students. And so that's the first application that I'd like to share with everybody. It's called the wheelofnames.com, right? And so the idea here is to constantly ask questions in class. A lot of us will say, Hugh, when I ask questions in class, nobody wants to answer me. Yeah? And so I normally have to wait in silence. And so studies have shown that you have to constantly ask people to answer questions. And the more questions that you ask, the more number of questions, the higher the frequency, the higher the number of people who will respond to you and the likelihood they will actually respond to you. Yeah. Of course, it's also very important when you ask the question that you don't answer the question yourself once there is no response. So you're like, guys, I'd like to know what is the importance of management, for example. And everybody's like, guys, anybody? Would you like to answer that question, please? And so when you sort of have this sort of open question without anybody, what happens is that people tend to shy away. So do call people out by their names. And this also helps you remember their names. Obviously, why is because we cannot picture who these people are. So these names help us give rise to understanding who these people are. So I'm just going to show and share my screen with you and see how we can actually do this, right? So I'm going to share this, and you can see here in my screen, for example, this is an example here, right? That you can actually place the names of students over here. If you like, you can add in a new name, right? So for example, I can add my name here, Hugh, and of course I can add another name. I'll say Risang, for example. So you can see that there's a lot of names over here. And so what you do is you just need to click this, and this will actually turn. And so this gives students a fair method to know that, well, they are going to be asked a question. Only one individual will be asked a question, right? And of course, this means that everybody is very likely to be asked. One of the things that we have to mention here is the idea of fairness. What happens is that normally the good students are the ones that are always constantly being called, because you can expect a response from these learners, right? It's also important we need to engage those who are not engaging properly. So this is actually one way for us to do so, right? So that is the first one that I'd like to share. Right. So the second one, on the other hand, is to create interaction and discussion through polls. Yeah, some things that I've done very early on where I asked you to fill it in. So I simply like to create polls and questions using Slido, right? So that's www.sli.do, right? So it's a very, very simple, free to use application where you can understand your students' opinions and interact with their responses, much like the one that I'm showing you to right now. So again, let's try and see how we can respond to this. I'm going to share the screen again, and I'll go back to Slido, right? And so I'd like you to go back here to www.slido.com, right? You can key in again 146686. How have you enjoyed the keynote so far? And state one thing that you liked or disliked from the keynote. So again, you can ask your responses and see what the responses are from the participants. So let's give this a try, right? And you'd like to interact with your class. So I'd like everybody to try this out now, right? You go on to slido.com 146686, and I'd like you to type in one thing that you like and dislike from the keynote so far, if there is any, right? So let's just give everybody 1 minute of time while everybody responds. Right, so has everybody been falling asleep so far? So I have one response. Thank you very much for that one respondent. Yes, you've learned a new tech tool. Right, so yes, a lot of you said that you like Slido. All right, that's great. Right, and I see that a lot of new questions, new sort of responses are coming in, right? Very interesting, informative, right? New ideas for teaching online. That's good, that's good. We have 9 responses. Okay, great. So I thank everybody for enjoying the session so far. Yes, 27 responses. Some of you are saying that this is new for you, right? I understand. But of course, this is a way in which we can engage our learners, right? So very good, very good. Thank you very much for those responses. So I'd just like to go myself. So if you create an account on Slido, which you can do for free, right? You can do it for free. You can also set a number of questions over here. So over here, you'll see a list of questions that you will have for your session. And what you essentially can do is create different types of questions. For example, over here, if I were to click create poll, right? You'll see a drop-down box of the different types of questions. For example, I've had a multiple choice question earlier on where I asked you to talk about your online experience so far. At the very start, I asked you a word cloud to see how everybody's feelings were as a group, right? You can create quizzes, you can create a rating, and you have an open text such as the one that we've just done over here. So you can see over here the responses. And this is something that everybody can see. So if everybody is on Slido, everybody can see this information as it is being presented. And the beauty of this is that it's anonymous. So people will not feel shy and people will tell their true feelings, right? Because you essentially want people to tell you the truth, but maybe people don't want to tell you the truth because they don't want to be known. For example, Hugh is an absolutely boring and uninteresting person, and I absolutely dislike what he's saying, right? And so people can just say that, and they can be honest about it. Yeah? So sometimes honesty is important because it allows you to reflect and improve as well, right? So Slido over here, very, very interesting, right? You can see all the responses that you can have over here. And of course, if there are some responses that you don't like, that you think is inappropriate, you can actually delete those responses by clicking on this here as well. So that's one thing that I'd like to share with everybody, which is the use of Slido. So hopefully this will actually help everybody in creating polls for your classroom. So the next sort of way in which we want to engage our students is the use of slides for our students. And so a lot of us tend to crack our heads and say, oh my God, you know, how am I going to make my class more interactive? How am I going to make it more fun, right? And so PowerPoint slides typically are not fun, right? Or it takes a lot of time for us to design it, yeah? And there are a lot of slide templates out there. And what I want to introduce everybody is a website that a lot of our school teachers in Malaysia are using, which is actually Canva. And so Canva is a very useful site to create fun slides that are visually appealing. Why? Is because remember, the way in which our students learn right now is through visual. People like to see colorful, bright things, yeah? And so you want to appeal to the students, especially at primary school level, pre-primary, very, very important for them to feel happy and they look at the slides, it's colorful. So let's take a demonstration, and I'll also introduce the Canva page to everybody. So let me just share this again. Okay, let me just share this. All right, so this is actually something that you can find on Canva. So if you go to Canva, so www.canva.com, you can see this sort of page where you can create templates and slides, for example. So you can go to the templates over here, right? And there's so many different types, and you can see education presentations, for example, right? You can see all of these templates which you can use for your class, for example, classroom sort of rules, right? You have reports, you have any sort of things. Yeah? So I've chosen one, which is the show and tell slides over here, right? And so you can pick anything and you can edit over here. So I've edited this and I say that welcome to Hugh's classroom, for example, or we can actually change this and I say that let's try something else. For example, you can key in something here and you can say that I'd like to do, I don't know, tenses, for example, let's say, right? So let's do this, right? So tenses, verbs, adjectives, for example, right? And so you can see that it's very colorful and it's very engaging. And of course, I can use different template slides. So all I need to do is just click on this and the template changes and I can edit any of these things that I want to, right? So I can change all of these things as I want. You can, of course, use interesting stickers over here. For example, here like this. I can right click, copy this, and then maybe in a blank slide, I can add this here. Right, I can put it anywhere I like, and I can just make it much better. So many a time we try to make ourselves more interactive and more fun. So designing slides that are interesting for our class is also very important as well. So I'd like to share with you one classroom sort of presentation that a student of mine who is actually a teacher in school is actually doing for her class, right? So this is a reading lesson by her, right? And her name is Kimberly. And so she's doing this for a primary school class for students of the age of 9 to 10 years old. So for example, you see here very cute questions, right? And so you say like, welcome everybody, are you excited for a fun learning session? And of course, I put the bunny here because it looks like me. I'm born in the year of the rabbit, for those of you who don't know, and I wear spectacles, so I like to look at the bunny who is wearing a spectacle. And so you can see that a lot of these objects move, right? They pop up. And so you can actually create this content very easily for your class, right? So for example, make sure that you have the following before we start: laptop, a notebook, pencils, a KWL chart, which is a knowledge, a want and learning chart. And so a learning diary and some drinks, right? And so you can see that the slides pop up from one to another. Right? You can actually create very simple instructions, for example, like this, a group activity. So read together with your partner and summarize what you have read, right? So you can clearly show and indicate what you want in your class, right? And so, okay, for example, you can create different groups. So group 1, this is your task. And then after that, you have your guiding questions, right? So look at the questions that you might want to have. You want to look at the summary. You can include the whole summary here in the passage. And then you can ask your students to write a summary. And so you can see that it's actually very clear, right? And it's not difficult for students to see. So something that is very important is that it's more interactive, definitely, than your typical Microsoft PowerPoint presentation, right? So you can have very, very cute things to engage your learners with, right? So this is a very, very simple presentation from Kimberly, right? And I hope that gives you some idea in how you want to design your class. Okay, so let's go back now, right, to this. So basically the idea from this is very, very simple. That when it comes to looking at interactive engagement, you need to make sure that your slides are engaging, especially for different levels of students. So, the next one that I want to get everybody to try is to use Google Jamboard, right? So Google Jamboard is essentially a whiteboard, right? It's an online whiteboard, and I've seen through the chat that some of you have actually used interactive whiteboards, and that's absolutely great. Yeah. But what I wanted to show was you can actually design activities on these sort of whiteboards that students may be able to sort of enjoy working together, right? It's a very simple whiteboard with functionalities, but the way in which you use it is also very important. And you can visit the Google Jamboard page on www.jamboard.google.com, right? So you definitely can create interactive group discussions where students can collaborate, discuss, and answer together. So I'm just going to share this again with my screen. Right, and I've got one lesson demonstration over here. So you can see here, you can see a clear lesson over here. And it says here, read the following sticky notes, then rearrange them to form a coherent story. So as you can see over here, there are all these sticky notes which I can move around, for example, yeah? And so you can share this with your students, for example, right? You can share this with your students and they can actually read the whole story. So for example, over here, you're like, which one would be a good topic sentence, right? You might want to ask your students that. And so you can share this with your students and they can actually play around with it and say, maybe it's this one here. So, okay, road accidents are a common problem in Malaysia. And so what do you think would be a good supporting detail for this, right? And so maybe you were like, I don't know, right? How do we explain this, right? Why? You can say maybe, it's drivers who do not obey the traffic rules are the ones who cause the accidents. And so how do we prove this? Yeah, how do we prove this? Are there any examples? So maybe we can see which one would be a good example over here. Would it be this one? The cyclist fell down and struck his head? Or maybe there was an accident, right? So maybe you want to tell the overall story first, right? From the macro level and go down to the micro level. So let's talk about that process. Maybe number 3, there was accident in Kuching, right? Last week, which involved 2 cars and a driver. And then after that, maybe the cyclist fell down. And of course, we can also talk about the connecting sentences, right? So talk about sentence connectors. So which one would be a good sentence connector? So maybe luckily, for example, here. So you look at that, luckily, and then after that, what would be a good conclusion or concluding statement? Maybe we can avoid road accidents by obeying the traffic rules. So students can get the opportunity to play around with this. And you as the teacher can, of course, get the opportunity to mark, right? So you can either use a pen or a marker or a highlighter or a brush. For example, let's use a brush and use the color, the red color over here. So you can say, okay, guys, let's check this out and see whether or not this works. So road accidents are a common problem in Malaysia. Does everybody agree that this is the correct response? So maybe everybody says, yes, teacher, yes, I think this is the right one. So very good, you can actually tick this, right? So second one, of course, you can do this, and then after that, this one over here. And so maybe, for example, if you're asking your students to type, right? So you're asking your students to type, and let's say, for example, you're looking at this, right? You're looking at this and you say that there is a sentence error over here, yeah? So let's say, for example, there was a tense error, right? So it's tense error over here. So luckily the driver is caught, right? And handed to the police. So we can, of course, highlight this as well, right? By clicking on the pen, we go to the red button over here. And then we can, of course, circle over here. So you can say that, okay, this sentence over here, for example, Jonathan, this one is wrong. So what would be the appropriate method or the appropriate word to change this? You can, of course, sort of correct the student's work over here as well, right? So you can put an X over here. Doesn't look very nice because I'm using a mouse, but if you have a pen attachment, that would definitely help a little bit more, right? So Google Jamboard is actually very interesting. Yes, Miss Rina, Google Jamboard can be used by more than one student at the time. And yes, correct, Alina, this is correct. You can, of course, have this offline, meaning to say that they can do this at their own free time. I think this is what you're meaning, right? Asynchronously, right? So they can definitely use this in their own free time. Okay. Hopefully that helps in sort of answering those questions for you as well. So I need to go back to this because we are running a little bit over time and I want to share a little bit more with everybody in terms of what we can do as well. Right, so the next one and the probably the last one that I wanted to share with everybody is the idea of gamification of your quizzes. Formative assessments and summative assessments are very, very important for our students, especially when we don't use exams anymore. So we need to make sure that they actually can learn and we measure their learning. So quizzes are a very good way to do this. And we can use this by playing quizzes, for example. And I love to use quizzes because I think that it's very interactive and it's very fun. It comes with a lot of new nice sounds, and you can put images on this, and you can try a wide range of readily available quizzes, which is free for use. Yeah, so if you can see on the picture on my right here, I've looked at English and language arts on the quiz, right? And you can see so many that you can use. For example, order of adjectives, the verbs, the tenses, and you can look at the questions. And more importantly, you can edit those questions and you can tailor it to your own, yeah? And so you can create an interactive group discussions where students can collaborate, work together, and answer the questions together. I have a link to a quizzes, which is used for my management and leadership class, which you can also play with, yeah? So I'm happy to just share that with everybody at the moment. Just hang on a minute. Right, and so over here, I can share this link with everybody, right? And I'm just going to put this in the chat box. Hang on a minute. Right, and you can actually take some time to play this in your own free time. So maybe we can actually just click on this link right now, and we'll take 1 minute of time and trying to just simply answer these questions, right? So I'll just give everybody 1 minute of time, right? And for everybody to try out these questions. Right, and so I'm very powerful over here, right? Where you can actually get them to do it as a class, right? And of course, you can, of course, try to do this differently as well. So I see here while waiting for everybody to try this, Reina says that you used it as an assignment. That's good, right? And so Yumi says that you've never tried to use it as an interactive discussion. Yeah. So the answer here is why not, Uni, right? So when we come back to here, we go back to, let's say, for example, we look at the assignment, right? So you can assign this, right, as a custom deadline with class, and you have these assignment deadlines, right? And so you can have participant attempts, and you can see how they can actually do this together, or you can actually have different time limits, right? So you can actually get this to be useful as a group discussion as well. So have them on their Zoom, for example, have them try and attempt the quiz together. That's also one way of interacting in the classroom. So I see a lot of people using this. So thank you very much. That is a very good sign that everybody is using this very effectively. Okay, so let's go back and see so far. Right, we have quite a number of respondents, yeah, who have tried to answer. Some of you have gotten 2 questions right so far. That's the highest, yeah. And I don't blame you, because these are from a program from our Masters in Educational Leadership and Management unit. So don't worry if you don't get the answers right. I'm just giving this as an example for everybody. Okay, so let's go back to the slides and let's wrap up the session.